Good evening and welcome to In Focus, your trusted source for analysis of the stories shaping our world. Tonight we examine two critical developments impacting global politics. In our first segment, we explore why Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's political future appears as fragile as the recently announced ceasefire with Hamas. In our second segment, we shift our attention to the Ukraine conflict, analysing US President Donald Trump's provocative claim that lowering oil prices could end the war. Let's begin. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has recently seen a resurgence in his political fortunes. His government's military campaigns against Hamas and Hezbollah have weakened Israel's enemies across the region, and his ally, Donald Trump, is back in the White House. However, the 6-week ceasefire agreement with Hamas has left him vulnerable to both domestic and international pressures, threatening his political survival. Netanyahu's position remains precarious. While he boasts significant military successes, he faces threats from hardline coalition partners demanding the war's resumption, risking the collapse of his government. At the same time, President Trump's insistence on the ceasefire success places Netanyahu in a difficult balancing act. This unfolding drama highlights the challenges of navigating domestic and international pressures in a deeply divided political landscape. To discuss these developments, I'm joined by Ahmed Sayed. Ahmed, who is an international relations expert. Welcome to Qnews, Mr. Ahmed. Now, with Netanyahu facing pressure to resume the war in Gaza, how do you assess his ability to maintain his coalition?
I'd like to start to greet you and your viewers. In fact, that Netanyahu is between two contradicted pressures. Pressures to resume and sustain the truce and agreement, particularly from the U.S. part, as Trump pressed to ceasefire and to fulfill his vows and promises before the Arabs, and he is the man of peace and a strong man, so strongly pressured Netanyahu, while Biden has failed to practice any pressure, and that led the resumption of the war and not to reach an agreement. Upon the pressure of Trump, Netanyahu stood back and accepted the proposal that laid down in the past May. And also he's facing a pressure from the families of the prisoners and the detainees. The Israelis throughout the 15 months failed to liberate the detainees and hostages, and therefore Netanyahu pursued to accept the deal and to go in line with the international support of the agreement. There is also another factor that is related to Netanyahu's interest with respect to in reaching an agreement and to release the detainees, as he can't claims that he triumphed in Syria, Lebanon and Gaza without achieving the main goal announced upon the war, which is liberating the detainees. These factors are the tools of pressure upon Netanyahu to sustain the deal and the agreement of ceasefire. In return, there are some other pressures upon Netanyahu to complete an agreement, also to stick with the first phase. And these pressures come in basically from the far right, the party of Ben Ghafir, the Minister of the National Security, who resigned, as well as the Smotrich, the Minister of Finance, who pressured to not complete the agreement and following the first phase to continue the war. But Netanyahu is trying to maintain the government coalition as if Smotrich left the government and the coalition, that might lead to the breakdown of the coalition or the fallout of the coalition. And Netanyahu still has 64 seats of the Knesset, which is bigger, or the required number is 61, and there was 68 seats, adding the 4 seats of Minister of Foreign Affairs. Itmar has withdrawn. Netanyahu has now 64 seats, and if Smotrich withdraws, he has 7 seats in the Knesset. This would lead the coalition of 67, which is not enough. Therefore, Netanyahu is trying to please the far right and accepted the ceasefire and promised to Smotrich to agree the deal in return to distribute the settlement in the West Bank and to launch military offensive in Jenin. So Netanyahu is trying to make some sort of balance between the counter pressures from one side and from another hand to continue and resume the fight in Gaza.
Now, Netanyahu's military, I'm sorry to interrupt, I want to bring us on to some other issues as well. Netanyahu's military campaigns, of course, have weakened groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. But of course, more than 46,000 Palestinians killed in Gaza, more than 100,000 injured, thousands killed in Lebanon. Has there been a cost to Israel's global standing?
Netanyahu, even if he weakened the capabilities of Hamas and Hezbollah in Lebanon and weakened or what is called Iran axis that led the fall of Bashar al-Assad regime. All of this give Netanyahu the privilege and promote that he had won the battle in Gaza, and he wanted to change this face and the landscape of the Middle East. More than 70,000 in Palestine were killed. 12,000 of them under the rubble, and more than 120,000 wounded, and the destruction of 90% of Gaza Strip. Israel has faced a very international angry for his crimes against the Palestinian people and using the blockade and preventing all the basic needs of life, such as food, water, and medicine. In return, there was a great cost within Israel. Israel has lost thousands of soldiers who were killed, economic casualties that exceeded more than $100 million because of the halt of investment and the several manufacturers, and a great number of reverse army used to work in civil corporations had to go to the war. That made Israel is in a very aggressive state committing crimes against the Palestinian, even though he's trying to claim that he made some achievement due to the great casualties for the Palestinian side and Israel. Therefore, I say that Netanyahu has failed in achieving his own objective and failed to liberate the Tatars by force and to eliminate the resistance in Gaza. And all this reflected that Benjamin Netanyahu will face the trials for his failure in achievement of the goals of such a war.
Okay, well,
Hassan.
let's just talk a little bit about Netanyahu's relationship with the White House. You mentioned Biden just a few moments ago, and even though Trump's only been in office for 5 days, I'd almost forgotten that Biden was there at all. It seems like Trump's been in office for the last few months. Trump's influence in shaping Netanyahu's next steps, how important or how critical are they given their close relationship?
Benjamin Netanyahu is leaning to have a great relationship with Trump, but there is some sort of an approachment between both guys. In Biden's administration, Biden looked like a weak president and never managed to practice pressure upon Netanyahu, and therefore Netanyahu never responded to Biden's demand of the cessation of the war and in reaching a deal, because Biden was in fact weak, even though he supported Israel economically and militarily, and using the veto in the UN Security Council and protecting Israel in the international court such as the ICC. Despite all this full support of Biden, Netanyahu was dealing with Biden in a sense of non-appreciation and non-responding to him for more than 10 months, since Biden had presented his proposal in the 31st of May last year for peace agreement. Netanyahu never responded to this proposal and continued to put obstacles and cripple the conditions before the agreement, and he was always expecting Trump, and when Trump took office and demanded to the cessation of the war, Netanyahu had responded and given a political gift for his alliance, and he responded to his pressure in return to get Trump's support in other dossiers, such as military and economic support for Israel, and supporting Netanyahu within Israel. And Netanyahu wished to get the support of Trump in facing and confronting Iran, and in a bid of bombarding or striking to the nuclear facilities, where Biden objected such attacks of the nuclear program of Iran. I think that the relationship between Netanyahu and Trump will be in the heading to more allies, more approachment of stances, as Trump with respect to Iran is a bit different compared to Biden. Biden wanted dialogue and diplomacy and prevented the confrontation between Israel and Iran, or to be moved into comprehensive war. We know that Trump is more hardlined before the nuclear program of Iran. Therefore, the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio goes in line with Israel of necessity of a hardline policy against Iran. Trump also supported Netanyahu in the first term and to Israel and acknowledged the Golan or the Israeli sovereignty on the Golan Heights and moved the Israeli embassy to Al-Quds, and so he wants to get benefit of Trump to support his expansion project, especially related to the annexation of the West Bank and targeting the nuclear program of Iran. Therefore, I see that the relation is getting more close compared to Biden's and Netanyahu that witnessed some sort of great disagreement and tensions. Biden used to express his anger and accusing Netanyahu that Netanyahu is the one who is put an obstacle before the
Now, Mr. Ahmed, if you just want to stay with us, we're going to stay with Trump, but this time we will move our focus over to the Russia-Ukraine war. In a provocative statement at the World Economic Forum in Davos, US President Donald Trump has claimed that lowering oil prices could bring an immediate end to the Ukraine conflict. He proposed leveraging OPEC to reduce global energy costs, arguing that this economic strategy could undermine Russia's war efforts. But can oil prices really dictate the course of a war? President Trump's remarks at Davos have stirred global debate, with his proposal linking oil prices to the Ukraine conflict's resolution. Critics argue the plan oversimplifies the situation, as Russia's economy is resilient despite sanctions. This underscores the complex relationship between energy economics and geopolitical tensions, requiring more than economic measures to achieve peace. Well, Mr. Ahmed Sayed Ahmed is still with us, our international relations expert, to unpack these issues for us. So President Trump's assertion that lowering oil prices could end the Ukraine war has raised eyebrows at Davos and beyond. Do you think it's a plausible solution, or does it, as critics have said, oversimplify the situation?
That President Trump's statement that lowering the oil prices would lead to the end of the Ukrainian-Russian war immediately. It is simple and naive, as firstly, he does not understand the nature and the complexity of the Ukrainian-Russian war. So lowering the price won't lead to the end of the war. This war is linked to several complexities and linked also to Russia's stance that invaded Ukraine in February 2020 to foster its national security, following calling America and the West to include Ukraine to the NATO and to the dissemination of a very advanced military system in Eastern Europe. Hence, Russia has entered to protect its national security, as it said to protect the Ukrainian from the east of Russian origin, and saying that they are exposed of suppression from Zelensky regime, and in return Zelensky, the war of Zelensky between Zelensky and the West, Zelensky did not accept that the Russia would seize the eastern of Ukraine, which represent 20% of Ukraine's space, such as in the Donbass region. So there is a great contradiction between the Russian stance and the Ukrainian stance. And the second point, the lowering the oil prices is just a reaction, but the main factor for the Ukrainian war. I mean, if ended the war in Ukraine, so the oil prices will decrease as the war led to the increase of the oil prices. Not like Trump is saying, as ending the war would lead to the decrease of the oil prices. And the war had led to the increase of the energy prices due to the halting of the Russian exportation into Europe, as well as the increase of the shipment costs due to the war in Ukraine and the Black Sea. These factors that led to the increase of the oil prices. So the right thing is not, as stated by Trump, by lowering the price would end the war, but it's the other way around. Ending the war that would lead to solve the world economic crisis, such as the energy prices and energy security, as well as the food security. The war had affected the exportation of Russia and Ukraine from of the wheat.
I'll interrupt there. I mean, that's an interesting point that you're making, that lowering oil prices won't stop the war, but stopping the war would lower oil prices. And President Trump's also talked about increasing US domestic products as well, and he thought that might put pressure on Russia. How aligned is President Trump with the broader international community's ideas towards how we stop the Ukraine conflict, especially Europe? Is he aligned with them? Do they think he's mad, or are there big differences?
America, as a result of Ukrainian war, is suffering from the increase of the energy prices, and the American citizen is suffering the inflation. For instance, the gas gallon has increased from $2 to $9. That is put more burdens upon the shoulders of the American citizens. One of the things during the campaign, the election campaign, is to work on lowering the prices by increasing the production of gas. And as he's saying that America is the biggest producer of the gas, therefore he launched a program of drilling the oil and gas, particularly in Alaska. As we all know that Alaska, according to the Biden's resolution, as a natural preserve that cannot do the drilling. But Trump has already overruled this executive order by issuing a new executive order starting the drilling, as considering to increase the American production would also lead to the increase of the supply. So Trump also is trying to pressuring the OPEC country to increase the production.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. It's very good to have your your expertise on these issues. Thank you very much to Ahmed Sayed, an international relations expert. Thank you for joining us here on Q News. Now, as we've seen tonight, the interplay between politics, conflict and economics remains as intricate as ever. From fragile ceasefires in the Middle East to the global impact of energy prices, the challenges before us demand nuanced and collaborative solutions. Thank you for joining us here on In Focus. We'll see you next time. Good night.